everybody, Eve Harow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. It is towards the end of August 17th, 2020, and the 27th day of Av, 5780. Oh, it was a very long day today, and it's nice to just be sitting down. I want to introduce you all to Moshe Zeldman, who has a wonderful organization called Meet the Israelis, which is going to answer your question right now about why we're not talking about the United Arab Emirates and all that politics. You're getting that from everywhere else. I just wanted to have like a nice conversation with somebody who I think is doing something pretty special for Israel. The rest of that stuff, you'll get somewhere else. Anyway, so here we go. So Moshe, thank you so much for joining me on Rejuvenation.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so you're based in Jerusalem, yes?
Yes, based in Jerusalem.
Okay, and what is this organization, Meet the Israelis? Full disclosure, I'll tell my audience, I heard about it from my son Matanya, who is part of your program and has been speaking to me about it for a while. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This sounds like a great person to interview and for my audience. So here we go. So what exactly is Meet the Israelis?
So I'll tell you just the background story so you see the
Absolutely.
context of it. I'm originally from Canada, from Toronto. I made Aliyah in 91. People always ask me how long you've been in Israel. I'd say it's been about 30 years. I'm starting to get used to it.
It is. It is. We came in 1988, so I say now it's over 30 years. Exactly.
So like it's I moved to Jerusalem and I find myself, as opposed to Toronto, I find myself walking down the streets of Jerusalem and you meet Ethiopian Jews that you don't see a lot of in Toronto. You see Arabs, you see soldiers with guns, you see left-wing protesters, you see right-wing protesters, you see Christian Arabs, you see ultra-Orthodox Jews, you meet all kinds of people. And coming to Israel as a newcomer, I thought I'd really like to just understand what the heck is going on in this country. What do all these people stand for? What is it like to live in a settlement? What's it like to come from Ethiopia? What's it like to be an 18-year-old soldier? And, I had this dream of, one day I'm going to take every one of these different dudes out for a cup of coffee and just ask them a million questions. Like, what's it like to be an 18-year-old holding a gun? What's it like to be in a settlement where you're worried about terrorism? What's it like to be a left-winger where you feel like you're a minority because Netanyahu's been in the government forever or whatever?
Right.
So I never did that. I never did the personal conversations, but I thought I'll just create a program that gives audiences a chance to have that kind of interaction. So it's not like a lecture series. It's a chance for audiences to come in. I usually with American student groups that come in, college groups that come to Israel, and I give them a chance to sit in one room in small groups. One group's meeting a right-wing Israeli settler. One group is meeting an ultra-Orthodox Jew. One group is meeting a left-wing peace activist. One group is meeting a soldier. One group is meeting an Ethiopian. One group's meeting an ultra-Orthodox Jew. They have a 15-minute conversation. And I tell the participants, I say, listen, you can ask them anything you want. You can talk politics, you can talk religion, you can talk Trump, you can talk Black Lives Matter, you can talk about falafel and hummus, whatever you want. This is your chance to get to know who this person is as an individual and what they stand for with where they stand on the political religious spectrum. Every 15 minutes, you get up and meet a different Israeli. And you go around the room over 2 hours having 6 very different, compelling, interesting, eye-opening conversations.
It sounds like speed dating with Israeli society.
Exactly. It's the Jewish political version of speed dating, basically.
Okay, so I have a ton of questions to ask. First of all, what is your background that you did you come from like an organizational background, high tech? How are you able to put this together?
I went through the Jewish day school system in Toronto, but I wasn't really that religious, actually. Kind of anti-religious, more or less. But I became more religious myself as I went to university. I was doing my degree in Toronto. I did my degree in artificial intelligence.
That's why you became more religious? How's that connected to artificial intelligence? That's a different conversation. Because I'm thinking, wow, I never thought of a connection between artificial intelligence and religion, spirituality. But okay, good.
The soul, the body, the mind, the brain. It's a whole
cool.
In any case, got married, made Aliyah. I was in education for many years here in Israel. I was teaching in various yeshivot, seminaries, traveled around the world. I've taught in about 25 different countries, seminars, programs.
What were you teaching in those different 25?
Basically Judaism, Jewish philosophy, Jewish ideas, outreach kinds of programs. But even when I was back in Toronto, I forgot to mention that I was very involved in university as an activist on campus fighting for Jewish issues. Meaning, as a 19-year-old, I was already very compelled to fight for, in those days, I'm sure you know, Soviet Jewry and Syrian Jewry, and fighting for the Israel Hasbara campaigns on campus, and fighting against missionary groups, and all different kinds of things going on. So I had sort of had activism in my veins.
Mm-hmm.
When I came to Israel, I studied, I taught, like I say, I did a lot of seminars, a lot of frontal teaching, a lot of classroom teaching all over the world. But I always found it limiting to be the lecturer with an audience of people who are prepared to hear what you have to say, but the people who aren't that interested in what you have to say are not going to come. So I want to create a program where everybody's interested, because you're going to hear everything you want to hear, and you're going to hear everything you don't want to hear.
So more of an interactive kind of a thing.
More interactive and more, I'd say more mind expanding, more getting you to think out of the box. Your average, let's say your average secular Jew hasn't gone out of the way to meet ultra-Orthodox Jews, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Your average strongly opinionated left-wing Jew with his friends and his Facebook page and his circle hasn't necessarily gone out of the way to really sit with settlers and have a dialogue, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So the real idea behind the program is to sort of get people to rethink ideas about Judaism, about Zionism, about Jewish identity, about Israel identity, about politics, about religion, by allowing yourself to hear views that you're not used to hearing.
Which is incredibly difficult, I think, these days, and getting more difficult. It seems to me, and I know that my audience would agree. Okay, it's virtually impossible to find somebody to respectfully listen to you, but really listen to you, or even pretend to listen to you. And everybody just wants to stay in their comfort zone, and whoever is in that particular zone is Satan. I mean, it's not even like I don't agree with them, but they're a nice person. I want nothing to do with them. So the audience, the people that you have come there, not the speakers, not the Israelis that they're meeting.
The participants.
They are the participants. Thank you. I've become semilingual in 2 languages after being here for so long instead of bilingual. They are drawn from Israeli society, because what you're describing now is Israelis who never got the chance to meet a Muslim Arab and a soldier and an ultra-Orthodox Jew all in one time, sitting and having a chance to do that, or are your participants from outside of Israel who are getting a chance to maybe get off whatever program they're on for a few minutes. If it's a yeshiva, if it's Torah seminary, there's very specific people they're meeting with. If they're on some birthright kind of a trip, then it's a different kind of audience. Or is it both? Who are their participants?
Now, when I started this 3 years ago, my aim was visiting American Jewish groups. And I really thought, just from my own experience, you come to Israel on a 3-week program, you're on a bus, and you go to Masada, and you go to the museums, and you go to the camel rides and the beaches and the bars and whatever. So you see a lot of Israel, you encounter a lot of Israel, you don't encounter a lot of Israelis.
Right.
You're not really part of the conversation, right? You might overhear at a cafe, or you sit beside somebody on a bus, but the idea behind this program was to get visitors, participants, Jewish or non-Jewish really, that are coming to Israel to experience not just Israel, but to experience Israelis and the Israeli conversation and the Jewish Zionist conversation, and the Palestinian debate conversation, to experience those conversations. So I did that for 3 years. With Corona, it really kind of put a hold on things because nobody's coming.
Nobody's coming. How did you tap into these organizations? Because most of them have a set schedule, set places they want to go to. A lot of them also want to be politically correct in the extreme. So maybe their donors are saying to them, "Oh no, you absolutely cannot put my group in a room with a settler." It's not happening. So that's a minefield in and of itself. How were you able to find those groups?
So the truth is, I started with one connection I happened to have with one of the Israeli service providers. I just happened to know somebody who works. I said, "Listen, I got this idea. Maybe try it out with one of your groups." She brought me in. We did it. It blew them away. They loved it.
Wow.
And I've done almost nothing in terms of PR and marketing. The program sells itself. I'd say any service provider looking to give their participants a different kind of experience. Not just another camel ride, not just another lecturer, not just another museum, but something much more alive, engaging. It's a real dialogue. The byline of my program is called Meet the Israelis, Real People, Real Opinions, Real Dialogue.
Right.
So it's very real and it's very engaging. And it's interesting. I've never, like I said, I've never had to reach out and convince people. I get the calls from new organizations that hear about me that want to bring in our program.
Well, that's fantastic.
And I've never yet encountered any organization that says, well, we don't want to hear the left wing, or we don't want to hear the right wing, or we don't want somebody Arab or ultra-Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point is it is pluralistic, and you're kind of hearing all voices. So it's meaning it's a fair, open exchange.
Right.
It's not slanted in any particular direction.
Well, one of the complaints that I know I've read about when it comes to groups that come here from all different sides of the spectrum is that they felt that they were getting propaganda. Exactly. Whoever had brought them was going to push their party line. So what you're doing is saying, you guys, you're hearing it. Well, I hate to use the expression from the horse's mouth. I mean, this is not Universal Studios, and you're not hearing that. You're going to be able to ask these Israelis whatever you want and get
all different perspectives, and you can ask any questions you want. Exactly. I mean, there's a whole movement now within the birthright world of students who say, I don't want this scripted birthright Zionist experience. I want to meet Palestinians. I want to hear the other side for myself. Right. I don't want somebody to determine which places I'm allowed to go to and which lectures I'm allowed to hear. Mm-hmm. So this kind of solves that problem, because, like, I put it like this. I think that anybody who's a strong right winger, let's say, should be very comfortable sitting in a room where the left winger also gets to speak. Because if you're really confident in what you believe in, you shouldn't be scared about somebody with an opposite opinion expressing it in the same room, sharing the dialogue. Now, if you believe, and I believe all my Israelis that have come might say, listen, your son, for example, is great at this. Matanya would say, listen, I don't agree with these left-wing peace activists. I think they're making a big mistake, but I'm happy to sit in a room with them and share the conversation. I'm not scared by them. Their views don't make me insecure. I believe in what I believe, and I want to share it. I think all my Israelis kind of feel the same way.
Yeah, no, he's actually told me that as one of the people who is talking, one of the Israelis that they are meeting, he's actually very much enjoyed talking to the other Israelis whom he might not have had opportunity to meet otherwise. I think there's a Christian Arab who's in the program that he came back and told me he had a fascinating conversation with. And as an Israeli, it made him feel more connected to Israeli society. These people are Israelis just like he is. And it's interesting to see their perspective on the things that are happening here as well. I mean, we're all sitting in that same basket. So I can tell you just from him that
that's pretty much the same for all of my participants. So what happens, 3 years we've been running it as a regular program, frontal experience, live for visiting groups, Jewish, non-Jewish groups. Once COVID-19 hit and that kind of ground all of tours into a halt, we started running it by Zoom. And we've had, not as many, but we're starting to reach out more now to do more Zoom. And Zoom is very much built for this. In other words, everyone in one room together, then everyone goes into their breakout rooms. You have 15 minutes with each Israeli, you just go to different breakout rooms.
Right.
It works beautifully. We lose very little of the impact on Zoom, and it's still very engaging and very live, and people can ask
And to some degree, I suppose it's even a little better because the people don't physically have to be here in Israel. So you could get people who weren't planning on coming who get to meet the Israelis. So there's an advantage to that as well.
100%.
But do you also have participants who are Israelis?
Good question. So one of the organizations we work with, it's an Israeli organization that brings Americans over, and they have Israelis and American high school students doing, encounters, dialogues, traveling together. So this year, since they couldn't bring the American component to the program, so the Rekezet, the coordinator in Herzliya said, listen, let's just do it for the Israelis. So I'm like, okay, it would be interesting to have Israelis meet the Israelis.
Right.
And we did it, and it just blew me away how well it went. It was the exact same level of like, wow, I met somebody who's a real settler. I met somebody who's really ultra-Orthodox or a real Arab. Like, people were just blown away by it. So we've decided really in the last 2 months, especially because of Corona, but even not, we are now making an effort to try and reach into Israeli high schools, youth groups, etc., because I believe the program has the same power, and it might even be more urgent for Israelis to learn how to hear from each other and speak to each other than the American visitors that are sort of sitting in on it.
And also who don't have skin in the game. I mean, when you live here in Israel, you need to be able to listen to opinions because that person's going to the voting box just like you are. Or I know when my kids served in the army, including Matanya, for many of them, that was the first really deep exposure to people who would come from very different backgrounds that they had. Because the army isn't all inclusive and not every sector of Israeli society participates in the army. So there was still something missing there. And
the largest growing populations in Israel are the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs.
Right.
And neither of them are represented by the army.
Exactly.
They're not in them. If you want to really meet the variety of Israelis, this kind of program really gives you face-to-face experiences with everybody.
What language are you running it in? English? Just English?
So for the visiting groups that come from outside of Israel, it's all been in English. We actually did a French program a few months ago, but it's basically been all in Hebrew, in English.
In English?
And then for Israelis, we're doing it in Hebrew. And it's very funny because my Israelis tell me when we did it in Herzliya, I think your son was there actually. Most of the Israelis said, finally, I get to just speak in my own language, like speak my heart about what frustrates me or what bothers me or whatever. So for them, it was just more natural to be able to do it in their mother tongue with fellow Israelis.
That's so interesting. I would also say not even in the language part, which definitely is huge, and there's cultural references that then you can make to other Israelis, but I would say also in terms of the dialogue being more around the dining room table. Because I would imagine that some Israelis are loath to criticize Israel maybe too much to others. I mean, they're going to, but there's still, they don't want, there's so much Israel bashing going on in the world that maybe they don't want to add to it. But when you're sitting with other Israelis, they bash away. I mean, we're all, it's like, it's family, so you can complain about everything.
Everything's on the table, and also the truth is Israelis are more, they're more familiar with the nuances. In other words, my ultra-Orthodox dude who comes and does his thing, most of them are, they're just waiting for somebody to ask the question, why don't you guys serve in the army? And you realize, well, a lot of these young American Jews don't even know about this issue of ultra-Orthodox Jews in the army. So they first have to get them bothered by the question so that they can doesn't that bother you? I didn't know it was an issue.
Right. No, because so there's other issues, maybe more, I don't know, pluralism in Israeli society, or what you mentioned, like in Ethiopian. So I think a lot of non-Israelis don't understand what a variety, I'll just put it bluntly, of skin color we have in this country, right? And how very much, you don't have that. I'm not going to say we don't have people who are stupid and racial and have their stereotypes of all kinds, just because we're normal. We're a normal society of people who are, have their problems, but you don't have the real intense divide like you have, for example, in the United States right now. Right. So it's very different.
So what I find interesting is at the end of every program, I do a survey and I say, I do a pre and post survey. The pre-survey asks the question, have you ever sat down to have a meaningful conversation with a Christian Arab, Muslim Arab, ultra-Orthodox Jew, left-wing, right-wing, Ethiopian soldier, etc.? And most people are most not connected to Ethiopians out of everybody.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. It's that most of them have never, especially living in America or Canada or South Africa, they've never met an Ethiopian Jew. They might know a little bit about the story about Jews that traveled through the desert of Sudan to come to Israel. Very few of them, or let's say this, most of them are shocked to hear that as Ethiopians that were rescued and brought to Israel, to this day they still face racism. All the riots that were going on last summer, Solomon Teka being murdered, there's a real issue here. And most outsiders, it's sort of this airing the dirty laundry. Like, we don't want to promote to the world that there's this actual endemic problem of racism against Jews, but it's a real issue, and Ethiopians want people to know about the issue.
Right, and here they're free to speak about it.
Exactly.
And and get it fixed, which is what we absolutely have to do. But there's a lot of those stereotypes. For example, that settlers run around and kill Arab babies and eat them for breakfast. That the ultra-Orthodox snub all aspects of Israeli society and just want welfare. I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes like that. So now you told us how you get your participants. How do you get the Israelis, the ones that are talking to the participants?
So that's a really good question. It's a good question because, I came as a Jewish young guy from Canada to Israel, married with my kids, just, sitting and, teaching my stuff. Like, I don't have a natural database of left-wing activists and Ethiopians and soldiers and et cetera. So the truth is, honestly, it was a lot of just going on Facebook and looking people up and contacting them and saying, listen, I got this program. Do you want to try it out? I am an active member on Facebook of about 4 different Ethiopian groups. I might be the only white guy there. I don't know. And left-wing groups and right-wing groups. And I get around and I get to know people, and people like your son who come to the program say, well, that was amazing. I want to do it again. I want to get my friends involved. I'd say most settlers would love to get more good settlers speaking in the program. Most left-wingers want to get that other good left-wing friend coming and speaking in the program.
It's a chance to make your case in an honest way.
Exactly.
Whatever your case is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, without it getting filtered through whatever journalist is interviewing you or whatever's going on.
What's fascinating is, the way the program is, most of the program is, like I say, going around the circles and, every 15 minutes meeting different Israeli. I end the program with everybody together, one big circle, and I ask them, I say, how many of you heard something today that shocked you, that you never heard before? Almost everybody heard something shocking.
Really?
And
That's
just like, wow, I
fantastic.
didn't know that, I didn't realize that, I never considered that. There's a lot of that. And then I give the students the chance to say, listen, you can pose any question you want now to all the Israelis. And right now in one room, you've got 6 very different opinions. So somebody asked, one of our seminars last summer, one of the students asked, he asked the Israelis, he said, how many of you feel like you're a minority in your own country? And all 6 said yes. All 6 of them.
Wow.
Yeah, the
Wow.
ultra-Orthodox said, of course I'm a minority, I'm ultra-Orthodox, they all hate me. Ethiopian was all during the riots, well, I'm a black Ethiopian, and there's places I can't get a job. And the left-wingers say, well, the whole country is the right wing, and Bibi's in power forever, and nobody listens to me. And the settlers say, well, everyone hates the settlers, so
Right.
everybody had the same.
Is this a good thing? We all feel like minorities in our country?
No, but it means like everyone
fascinating.
has a desire to want to sort of, correct the misunderstandings and misconceptions. Let me show you what a normal settler is like. Let me show you what a normal ultra-Orthodox Jew is like. They want to be in the program and have a chance to create that, answer questions, present their case, and give their information.
But maybe you've also tapped in here on the difference between a melting pot society and a multi-ethnic society.
Yes.
Because I've always said, I think that the latter is preferable. We shouldn't
100%.
all become, it's like you can have your vegetable soup where you see the carrot, you see the zucchini, and you see the potato, or you can take that little blender thing and make one big mush.
Mix it all up, right.
And mix it all up. And, while everybody there, I would hope, feels Israeli, but I don't know if that's true if they're coming to the program. Let's say if you have Muslim Arabs or Christian Arabs, would they say they feel Israeli? Would your Orthodox say that they feel Israeli? Or how do you even define Israeli? Someone who holds Israeli citizenship? Someone who lives here? How do you do that?
So those questions themselves end up being so complicated because
Right.
I'll have my ultra-Orthodox guy who might say something like, "Yes, I'm Israeli. I love the land of Israel, but I don't believe in Zionism. I don't believe
Right.
in the modern secular Zionist state of Israel." So I'm like,
Mhm.
well, what are you doing here, right? Then the Arab comes along and says, "Yes, I'm on a program called Meet the Israelis, but I don't really call myself an Israeli. I call myself a Palestinian, or I call myself a Muslim. I call myself an Arab. I don't
Mhm.
identify as an Israeli. I think Israelis are the Jews, and I feel like I don't have a stake in the game. I don't have equal rights." So it's just
Fascinating.
yeah. So at the end of the day, if people come out saying, "Wow, like it's really confusing," there's Israelis
Perfect.
who don't identify as you don't meet Americans who don't identify as Americans, or Canadians who don't identify as
Maybe.
Canadians.
Yeah.
It's rare to find, right?
Yeah.
So here, just
I don't know anymore, actually.
yeah,
I
today
think
nobody
America's
identifies in it.
changing.
Everyone identifies as whatever they feel like
Yeah.
any day of the week.
Right. Right.
But the idea of how people relate to their Jewish identity or their Israeli identity, their views of Zionism, etc., it is a really complex, nuanced conversation, and you
Mm-hmm.
only get it by having it with the people who can present their sides and hearing them all at once. I spoke to the last guy. He said this. Well, what do you think about that? And you get to hear the differences and go back and ask them again.
Right. Although I suppose to some degree it is self-limiting because someone who really doesn't feel like an Israeli isn't going to come on your program. If you have, or even if you have, let's say, a Muslim Israeli, but he's afraid, maybe he'll come on as a Meet the Israeli and his community will get upset with him. What are you doing? You're consorting with the enemy. Or someone, let's say, from the ultra-Orthodox world, someone might say, how can you do that? It's a secular program. So I suppose the people who really are in that situation aren't going to join. So you have perhaps the people from those sectors who are stepping out of their comfort zone.
Definitely true. Definitely true.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't end up getting the real extremes
Right.
in any of in any of our camps. But the reality is, I'm not looking for the extremes for the sake of having an extreme. I'm looking for something that's more or less representative of a middle ground,
Right.
whatever, settler right-wing view or left-wing view or Haredi view or
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. But I've often had, I've had Arabs who say, I've had even Ethiopians actually who say, is this a government thing? Am I going to get in trouble for speaking my mind? Are you filming this?
Right.
It's going to be posted on Facebook.
Wow.
People for sure have a certain nervousness about being very open. But like I
Mm-hmm.
said, once they see the program, we're not recording anything. This isn't government controlled. It's a totally open program.
Right.
People get comfortable and end up feeling very good about having a chance to have the conversation.
Can they get in touch with someone? Like, do you give out the email addresses of the people who spoke? So if they want to continue the
Some do, some
conversation?
don't. So what happens is, and not every Israeli I have has the means or the will to be in touch with every participant after the program, but
right.
somebody comes to me and says, I'd love to be in touch with whatever, your left-wing guy. I said, well, he doesn't have time, but I'll give you a couple of email addresses of other Israeli left-wingers who would be happy to be in touch with you.
Right. Right. So now, you seem like the kind of guy who never just sits and rests on his laurels. So what's like your future plan here, especially given, at least for now, the travel ban? We're not going to physically have as many groups coming in here, probably well into 2021, from what I'm understanding right now, or until there's a vaccine, or until people feel safe. You want to expand it to like different age groups. So right now you said you're mainly with students, but I can think of a whole lot of grown-ups, if you will, and some of the groups that I have guided over the years, women's groups, etc., who probably would benefit tremendously from a program like yours. Let's say, I'm just thinking about this one women's group that comes a lot. It's kind of Birthright for Moms. I've spoken about it before, who might enjoy meeting with women from these different sectors, just with women, and hearing what it's like to be an Arab woman in Israeli society. I'm
doing a program exactly like that in September. We're doing an all women for the first time, and it's a women's mission of some sort. I don't remember the name now. They're a new organization for me, but they said they want 6 women that represent, the Orthodox women, left-wing women, right-wing women, et cetera. So we're definitely open to moving in many different directions. Our main focuses right now are basically because of through Zoom to reach American audiences, especially that aren't coming to Israel. Those who are coming to Israel and have kind of the Zionist bug and want to get here on Birthright or whatever, they're kind of already half in the game and they're already engaged to some degree.
Right, just by coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have a huge percentage, I think it's more than 50% of American Jews that have no interest in coming to Israel. They're just not that connected.
Right.
They'll go to ACC for a program or a federation event or whatever, but they don't have the Israel bug. They don't have that much of an inclination to come. So we're going to bring the Israelis into your living room through a Zoom program. That's one effort, is to work on that front. The second one is, like I say, doing with Israeli high schools now. We're starting to work with Israeli high schools, both Zoom and live. We're going to be doing an initiative starting in October. My dream really is to take the Israelis that I have, and when travel is a little easier and the restrictions aren't as severe, to bring the Israelis to the States on tour.
Wow.
Bring all 6 Israelis and have them go around to different communities, to do media events and go to high schools and go to federations and Hillels and campus groups. And you have so many American Jews and non-Jews that have never had that kind of Israel experience.
Right.
You're going to eating a falafel. Like, you're meeting Israelis and you're watching them argue with each other, you're hearing the issues that they discuss.
That they're definitely going to hear.
Yeah.
It's our national pastime.
The fireworks always happen at the end of the program when the Israelis start, yelling at each other.
Right. But then they're all talking afterwards and going out for a beer. And that's the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really the difference, is that they can get totally worked up and even animosity and you're an idiot and, and then like it's over and okay.
But we got to learn how to live with each other, because you're not leaving anytime soon and I'm not leaving anytime soon.
Exactly.
And that's why it's not a melting pot. In other words, the multiculturalism is, I accept the reality that as strongly as I disagree with you, we live in the same tiny house called the land of Israel. We've got to figure out how to get along, even if we never agree about basic things.
But if the ship sinks, we're all on the same line. Yeah. So that's a very big. But you're talking about, when you say America, even you're Canadian, I assume you mean North America. I went. No, I just didn't. Why is it in my mind? Because I went to a physical therapist last week because I've been having a back issue, which thank God she was amazing. And she's from Toronto. So she said to me, it took me moving to Israel to become American.
Yeah, exactly.
Because everybody just assumes I'm America. Like Canada's that province north of America. It was very funny. But you could, just in English, you go to Australia or then there.
No, so by Zoom now, through Zoom, we did a couple of South African programs. We did an Australian program. We did a Montreal program. Yeah, we have been reaching out to, look, right now the major effort, like I'm saying, is to reach out to Jewish groups that are looking for more programming now that their programs aren't coming to Israel. It's either one of two things. It's either, I can't get to Israel, how do I give them an Israel connection and an Israel experience, right? And number two, it's even for non-Jewish audiences that want to just
that was my next question. Would you also do this for a non-Jewish audience?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, we haven't yet. It hasn't been on our agenda.
All right, guys. I've got many non-Jewish listeners. Let's do this.
Let's do it. More than happy to.
Yeah.
It's for sure
Okay.
just as suitable for non-Jewish audience. There's nothing particularly Jewish about the program that would exclude anybody.
Right, except for the arguing. But actually, the truth is everyone's arguing today, so that's totally fine.
Exactly. No, Canadians are shocked
We've
by it.
shared
Like,
that.
just get along and everyone just be polite, you know?
Right, exactly. So how does someone get in touch with you if they're like, wow, this is something I'd like to do?
So I'll be happy to post my email address if you want to be in touch in terms of bringing organizations, participating in other
Right.
programs, Zoom programs, and our website. I think our website, my email address, I can give you. You can post, and that'll be the best way to be in touch with me.
Okay, so it'll be in the text that accompanies this
Yeah.
show. And so let me, there must be some kind of cost involved, no? How
Yeah,
does
of course.
that work?
No, I pay my Israelis, and they're just administrative costs and keeping up the program, and
Right.
hiring people to run the program, et cetera. So
Right.
it depends on the size of the group, depends if it's Zoom or if it's live. But there's for a large group, I would do maybe 8 Israelis. For a small group of 20 or 30, we would limit it to 3 or 4 Israelis to keep it more intimate. So it really depends on the size of the group, depends if it's Zoom or if it's live. But yeah, we have a price list for all the possibilities, all the options. I try to limit it to maximum 8 to 10 Israelis per group.
Okay.
If I have a group of, let's say, 50 participants, I'd want to have no more than 6 or 7 Israelis. So it keeps it intimate. You don't want to have one Israeli talking to 12 or 15 people.
Right, exactly.
There's no classroom again. I want to keep it as a more intimate dialogue.
Right, and like the male-female ratio, you do that. There's women and
100%.
women.
Almost as much as possible, depending on who's available. But it's an equal number of men and women Israelis who are involved.
Right.
I want to tell you one for me, a very touching story that I had a few weeks ago. We did a group in Tel Aviv. It was a Zoom call, actually. And my normal 3 left-wingers who were available weren't available that day. So one of them
they must have been demonstrating against me.
Yeah, exactly. There's something going on. So one of them said, listen, I've got a very close friend. Her name is Stav. She's great. She'll get what you're doing. She'll be great. So, I interviewed her by phone and it sounded good and she understood the program. So then it comes time for the Zoom. It's about 5 minutes before. And I make sure everyone's online and everyone's Wi-Fi is working and everything. So this woman, Stav, comes on and it's pitch black. I'm like, Stav, I can't see you at all. She's like, well, it's dark in here. So we'll turn on the lights. She says, I'm blind. I don't know where the lights are in my apartment. They never turn on the lights.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, I didn't know you were blind. She's like, oh, you didn't? She's like, you invited me to speak not because I'm blind? I'm like, no, we needed a left winger. So she said, wow, she said, I get invited to speak in lots of places, but I'm coming as the blind person. What's it like to be blind? And here you're inviting me to speak in a program, and you don't care if I'm blind. You just want to hear my views as a left-wing Israeli. Like, people actually want to hear what I have to say.
That's beautiful.
So it took her 5 minutes to find the light switch.
Okay. All right.
But to me, even for me, it broke a certain boundary of I look at somebody in blind, I think of them as blind, I see somebody in a wheelchair.
That becomes their defining attribute.
You label them for what you see.
Right.
And that's a big part of this program is you meet somebody, whatever, Arab, Orthodox, left, right, and you realize, yes, they live in a settlement. Yes, they study in yeshiva all day and they don't go to the army, but they have a life and they have kids and they have a boyfriend or girlfriend and they have a whole rich story to how they got to where they are, and you want to see the person behind the label.
Right.
And that's a big part of creating a level of tolerance is realizing, like I said, real people, real opinions, real dialogue. I can respect them as a person who's entitled to their beliefs, even if I'll never agree with their beliefs. At least I was exposed to them. I heard it from them. I understand it better now. I don't think of them as somebody I could never deal with or talk to. And that's what we start to build bridges.
Listening to you, I'm thinking, this is so obvious. I mean, why didn't someone do this a long time ago? Duh. This is just win-win.
I'll tell you, I've been involved in Jewish programming for decades now, and to set up a good program and have the right speaker and the right cost price and the right environment, and the weather has to be good, and there's a million, as a
speaker,
there's a million factors beyond your control. Here, it is so unscripted. You just throw them into a room and say, "Yalla, talk." And it always works great. Nothing has to be scripted or limited other than time, right? Make sure everything happens in 15 minutes. But it's so organic and it's so real that I just don't touch it. And it just runs by itself and everybody loves it.
Right. You just let it fly and let everybody do their own thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to stop a program or kick somebody out, either participant or speaker, because something got too heated or was inappropriate or I don't know.
I've
Anything,
the one
without
person
mentioning
I've
names,
had-
of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Your son never got in trouble, put it that way.
Okay. It wasn't
That's what you're
fishing for that. No. No.
No, so I had 2 summers ago, my ultra-Orthodox fellow who prides himself on not really reading newspapers, not knowing what's going on in the world, not exposed to gender issues and gay
Right.
pride parades and everything else. So he was speaking to a group, and this one girl said, "I'm a lesbian. How do you feel about that?" And he literally said, "What's a lesbian?" Like he just didn't know. He didn't know the term lesbian. Just didn't know.
Wow.
He's very, very in his own world.
Wow. Very sheltered in his world.
But
Wow.
yeah, so she described herself, and he's like, "That is gross. Like, how could you do that?" That was his reaction. And she started crying, and she got up and
Which-
walked away and said, "I can't
Yeah.
deal. I can't deal." And she walked out of the room. And she says, "I can't hear any more Israelis. This was triggering for me."
Right.
She got very upset about it. But at the end of the program, she came back in the room and went to this person and said, "I want to come to your house for Shabbat."
No kidding.
Because she realized, like, it wasn't coming from anger. He's
No.
just being very honest about something he's never encountered. And somehow she found something very authentic about it instead of getting offended by it. It took her a while.
Good for her, though.
He went out of
I
her way
wanna
to
say
"I want to go
good-
to your house for Shabbat." I know, it's amazing. It was amazing.
Really good for her, because she could have just gone into the corner and pouted
Yeah.
and been upset, and everybody would have understood why.
100%, yeah.
But amazing,
Yeah,
really.
there's an authenticity that makes people appreciate. Like, you're not here to try and twist my arm or make me feel bad or try to, propagandize me. It's just people honestly expressing their opinions. And sometimes you're going to like it, and sometimes you're really not.
Mhm.
That's part of the education, is you're willing to expose
It is
yourself
part
to
of
what you haven't heard.
education.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's a great story. I'm glad you shared it. I really am glad you shared it. And, sometimes people will say to me, because the Western Aliyah is more of a pull Aliyah usually than a push Aliyah, at least up until recently. Most
Right.
people who came from North America, from Australia, weren't coming because of religious persecution or
They weren't running
economic
away from anything.
deprivation. Weren't running away from anything. We were coming because we wanted to live here. And one of the things that I've heard over the years is you don't find those Israelis really in politics. Like, you don't find those Olim, the
Right.
English-speaking Olim, if you will, just to give it kind of a
you're
frame, so involved in the public sphere. But what I have found is that with initiatives such as yours, or things having to do with, kids who need special help, like, different kinds of programming, we're very much even overrepresented.
Right,
And it's perhaps because in the countries from which we come, if you want to do something significant for the Jewish world or for the Israeli world, you have to do it yourself. It's not like the Jews who came from the Soviet Union, where everything was controlled by the government, or even here in Israel, where there's a ministry for everything. And it's less than it used to be, but usually there's someone to write to or someone to call. You don't have that. You want to put up a synagogue, your community puts up the synagogue.
You're on your own, yeah.
Or a day school, or anything, you're on your own. And I think some of that initiative spills out when we do come here and say, there's something missing in Israeli society. Instead of saying, who can, I'm going to be the person who steps up and does it.
Right.
And I think you're a classic example of that.
No, so I think part of it is being the outsider, looking at the society and saying, why does everything have to be so intolerant? Why can't, why don't people just sit down and talk to each other? Why does it have to be so hard? And
you're clearly Canadian. Yes.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Like you should. One of the, outposts to being able still to
I'm really just trying to make Israel more Canadian at the end of the day.
You're right. I don't know about that, but okay, yeah, I get it.
Like, I'm looking at it as an outsider and saying, like, I don't, just sit down and talk to each other. You don't have to agree, but instead of just yelling and
courtesy and respect. Yes, those are nice words. Those are nice words. Fantastic. Okay, Moshe Zeldman, thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody, just tell me what the website is. I'll repeat it now.
Sure.
Your website?
meettheisraelis.com.
Okay, that's with two E's, meat, for my carnivore listeners.
Yeah,
exactly. Never know. Okay.
meettheisraelis.com, and my email is moshe@meettheisraelis.com.
Okay.
And like I said, anybody's interested, both Israeli organizations that want to bring us in for Israelis in Hebrew,
Okay.
Jewish groups outside of Israel that want to do it by Zoom, or who are bringing groups to Israel. And we're sort of aiming at all Jewish audiences, non-Jewish audiences. We're we're open to expanding it to anybody who's interested in engaging in this kind of content.
Okay, so of course, I absolutely can't resist, given what was on the news cycle the last couple of days. Maybe you'll get a letter from Dubai, or I don't know, United Arab Emirates saying, "All right, we're normalizing ties. It's time to meet the Israelis."
Time to meet Israelis, exactly.
Stranger things have happened, so
Exactly.
I wouldn't put anything past
It's a
that.
sign of good things.
It's a sign of good things. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining me here. Everybody,
pleasure.
you can be in touch with me, Eve at thelandofisrael.com. I want to thank Ben and Tabitha. And I want to wish you all also a Chodesh Tov. The new month of Elul is coming up in just a couple of days, the big month before the High Holy Days. So there's a lot going on. And I just hope everyone is listening as well. And if you do want to hear something a little more political, and you're listening to this kind of in live time when it's coming out on Tuesday, I am going to be hosting a webinar on Tuesday night Israel time. Might be too late actually now that I think about it for you guys, but no, the truth is I think you'll have some time. You can go onto the One Israel Fund Facebook page and you can sign up. You can register for that, but it'll be on there even afterwards. And so, we just got a lot going on. I'm finding it amazing, even though I don't have tourists, how that I'm busy with doing other things. So we're all kind of reinventing ourselves these days with the world's out of control in so many other ways. Moshe, thank you so much again. Really, I
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And your program. And if I have any ideas, I'll shoot them your way.
I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Terrific. Okay, everybody.
All
the best. All right, everybody. Eve Harow, Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. And that is going to be it for today. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.